Hey everybody, welcome to Wednesday. Yes, it's Wednesday. Okay, I apologize, my eyes are cracked out. The patrons will get the complete story of why I look cracked out right now. So, if you want to hear the exciting behind the scenes stories in my life and work that usually involve hilarious physical accidents, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Yes, I do a lot of strange things, meaning I get a lot of strange injuries, but that's not the topic today. I don't know which of the two topics I originally chose to do today I want to do better, so I'm probably going to do both. But this first one is about the ongoing Ubisoft. I don't know how to neatly summarize the whole thing. Basically, there's stuff going down, and there were management failures. The accusations are all over the place. But what it basically comes down to is sexual harassment in the workplace. And I have been getting quite a few messages saying, is this plausible? What do you think about this? Is this? And so I didn't say much early on. And this is where I have to do the disclosure thing. I do know, I know numerous people, not numerous, but more than three people who work at Ubisoft. I know even more people who used to work at Ubisoft. One person I trust very, very much, not just to be truthful but not exaggerate, tried to blow the whistle on bad behavior and got ignored. So that's the first plank of this, right? Is there something to this? In my opinion, yes. Not only is that little detail there, which is, why as a straight up reporting, it's like, no, you recuse, let other people cover it, right? But people are asking, so this is my personal view. So there's that, but there were also comments that people told me throughout the last 4 or 5 years, I guess, that either they felt set up to fail. Multiple people said they got pushed back when they tried to have a playable character in a game that was not white and male. Other people said that there are basically cliques within the company, and all the different games, the different franchises are all sort of treated like fiefdoms, and they're sort of a clique within the individual IPs, and if you offend a given clique in those IPs, then you're not gonna get work. And that to me is the thing that makes sense underlying the sensational headlines that we're hearing right now. That explains why some people I know have had great experiences at Ubisoft. Other people have had obviously significantly less great experiences at Ubisoft. And at the end of the day, that kind of cliquiness is a management failure. You do need teams that work cohesively and coherently, but that means that you have a group of adult professionals that knows how to solve problems, not that everybody works as a hive mind in an echo chamber where there is no dissent. Now, let's step back one layer further. And some of you who have followed my content for a while probably know what I'm going to say now. Two things. One, this is not a problem solely about Ubisoft. This is also not a problem solely affecting women. I am concerned about the framing on this issue. The idea that harassment of women is the whole picture, instead of it being a canary in a coal mine for much deeper problems at a company where no one feels like if they come forward and if they report bad behavior or even express concerns about behavior, that one, they're not going to be heard, two, they're potentially going to be retaliated against. I have heard horror stories about other game developers. I mean, the stuff at Naughty Dog is now well known because of the reporting of Jason Schreier. But there are other places, and that's where I start going, because I do not have anybody willing to come forward as a witness. I do not want to compromise the people that put their trust in me telling me these things. And I do not want to damage any potential stories that are in the works, because I know that there are people with more schlep and more access than me working on this stuff. But just if we look at the issues, we know crunch is a problem in the industry. And I really think that crunch culture, and I hate the term toxic workplace environments, toxic working environments, but I don't know what else to call it. There's a big difference between wild party culture, which I can confirm, Ubisoft, I don't know about now, but back when I still got invited to Ubisoft things, yeah, the Ubisoft parties were fucking wild. Sorry for the F-bomb. There's no other way to describe it. Now, I personally never had a bad experience at one of those. However, I did see some behavior that current year would be considered highly, highly inappropriate. Now, everybody was in on the joke back then, but yes, simulated sex acts were involved. They were wild parties. They were people just going crazy after years working on a title. It all felt very celebratory, but I can very much see how someone who's not down with that kind of celebration might feel uncomfortable. And if those people then felt like they couldn't say anything, obviously that's not okay. Now, I should disclose as well, I have had my own problems with Ubisoft. In their PR department, the people who liked me left the company, in some cases because of toxic work environment. But there are some people at Ubisoft who, for whatever reason, don't like me, go out of their way to stomp any access requests I have. I always got the sense that the people who were friendly to the company were sort of sneaking me review copies and stuff like that. They always came very, very late and from their personal email instead of their work email, sort of thing. So as much as I appreciated them doing that for me, I don't want to push things too much, and especially when they were at the company. I did not want to push things too much, but I got the distinct impression that there is a particular person in the PR department who is not male. I will say that. Who is toxic to female reporters, and based on my conversations with other members of the Canadian media, I am not the only female reporter who thinks so. I do not feel comfortable naming names. I do not feel comfortable making a formal complaint, but this person was one of the reasons that I stopped doing direct access content about game companies. They are far from the only one. Ubisoft used to be the absolute best company, but then I noticed that my appointments kept getting lost and I was being shuttled in last minute, and I really, really appreciated, my contacts at the company who liked me doing that. But I knew what it was. That's part of the job. You have to play angles. But my coverage of Ubisoft was never scathing or awful. It was just sort of known that this particular PR person just stomped on any female games journalist. Just didn't like them. Pick the Lindsay Lohan movie of your choice kind of thing, metaphor, right? There was also some stuff with friends of mine at the company that for a while, and I think this is important because it gives a complete picture. When the whole Gamergate thing was happening, they basically couldn't be seen in public with me or couldn't be seen corresponding with me because of the cliques at the company. So, this idea of a female-friendly environment, it was what one could argue that this ties in to some of the treatment of women at the company, because golly gee whiz, it's only female friendly if you're the right kind of woman, right? And this is the important thing, both sort of big picture and microcosm here. One, if you don't treat your female staff like people, you're probably not treating your staff in general like people. People should not have the ability in a well-run company to bully anyone for any reason. No one should feel like they have to put up with unprofessional attentions, shall we say, out of fear of keeping their job. People will say, well, just go work elsewhere if you don't like the culture. That's not so easy. Not in order to get another job at a AAA company often involves expensive relocation. And keep in mind that, Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Toronto, they're in Canada. So it's not so simple to just jump from a Canadian AAA studio to, say, BioWare Austin or Naughty Dog or something like that, because that requires a green card. We know what's going on in America right now. So this idea of you don't like it, leave. One, it's not right on principle. Two, it's not practical. So I think we can all understand why people would be keeping their mouth shut on a lot of things. Now, there are other AAA game dev studios in Canada, but Canada is a big country, and a lot of them are out in Vancouver, which is, it's like relocating from New York City to LA. It's actually worse than that. The flight from New York to LA is shorter than the flight from Toronto to Vancouver. It is moving from one very expensive city to another very expensive city. When you have to do that every 2-3 years, because, that's when your contract comes up and you can't stay put, you never get ahead. You can never put down roots. You can never really have much of a life. And that's what it comes down to is, I don't think some of the accused are bad people, even though they have possibly to probably done bad things. I keep going back to the fact that I interviewed Max Bellond when I still got stuff from Ubisoft Toronto, when he was working on Splinter Cell Blacklist, and he had pictures of his wife and kids on his desk. He talked very glowingly about them in the interview. So either he was totally full of shit then, or something major happened between now and then. And both are possible, right? I didn't have enough time with him and we weren't saying anything contentious, right? He was mostly on script. The times I really get a sense of somebody is before the camera's rolling or after the camera's rolling. And of course, that's the parts the PR people like to cut down on as much as possible, because then you do get a sense of them. Now, if someone's a great person, then it's of benefit to the company to let them talk. But PR people really need to control that process. People have to understand that game devs seem to live in fear of not just the games press, but their own PR departments. So no one can do their best work and no one can be their best selves in an environment where they are afraid. And I am not saying that excuses, certainly not the worst of the behavior that came out. I do think that innocent until proven guilty applies. Investigations need to be done. It's just one of those circumstances where there were so many accusations, and the fact that, I've heard from people I very much trust that there are problems, but they are not across the board. That's why I feel comfortable enough speaking about this. But again, I want to be so abundantly clear. I am speaking out about this not to single out Ubisoft. Certainly not single out Ubisoft Toronto. It supplies a lot of lucrative jobs, especially to Toronto area actors, especially to Toronto area actors of color. That these are important things to keep in mind. One of the reasons that there are these tensions at Ubisoft Toronto is that they hire a more diverse workforce than other game companies in the first place. And I think that needs to be stated. I suspect that if other companies were equally diverse, then we would be hearing the same issues openly at other companies. Now, we do go back to, cases like EA Wife and the stuff at Rockstar. And that's what's so upsetting to me about the UB Toronto situation specifically, because I know people who left Rockstar North, they left EA Studios, and those places are pieces of crap. I will never work for them again. And they seemed much happier at UB. And so this is where I'm like, okay, if we're hearing all the bad stuff in a company that is better than others, yikes, right? And that is not to confirm there's bad stuff still going on at these companies. This is stuff that was happening previously and was previously reported on. They may have cleaned up their act. I believe Rockstar North actually closed. I'm not sure, though. But the issue is this is widespread. And I do think we're being myopic when we're focusing on the abuse of women. Because abuse of anyone is wrong. And for God's sakes, we know that is widespread in the video game industry because of persistent crunch culture and a lack of job security. And the continued move by many US-owned video game companies to push more and more production to right-to-work states like Texas. When a company is moving to a right-to-work state, right to work means union busting, but it doesn't just mean anti-union. It means generally less workplace protections, no job security. Now, you guys all know that I am not a believer in unions protecting people's human rights and human dignity. That's not been the history of unions. Unions have been complicit in perpetuating and making worse discriminatory practices. And I'm not talking just about the police unions. The NAACP was taking on major U.S. unions in the 1970s. The unions do not have a great track record protecting vulnerable people. In fact, it's the opposite. Unions like their people to stay in jobs. So if someone has more seniority than the person making the complaint, the natural inclination is to back the person with more security because they're a good union guy, right? that will make worse the imbalance of power we are seeing, not make better. What is going to make it better? Well, these stories have to come out, for one. But also there has to be some way of rewarding companies that do good instead of just punishing companies who do bad and it gets out. You know, Glassdoor seems to not be working in that regard. To a point, I guess. Glassdoor is a service where people can talk about, you know, their experience as an employee at a company. I believe anonymously or at least under pseudonyms. But the only way to get a cultural shift is to get a cultural shift. The only way these companies are going to stop crunching is if the consumer stops rewarding crunch. And that is not to put the blame on the consumer. They're like, what do we do? Yeah, gamers get too much shit as it is. But the only way we can really stop this as a community is to go, not okay. I'm not going to reward crunch. Like, I'm not going to give you money if you keep crunching your employees. And that becomes very difficult in games like Cyberpunk, that looks awesome and everybody's really excited about it. And, you know, CD Projekt said they were going to reduce crunch, and then, oh no, we're still crunching. We couldn't help it. I think what we can do is not praise companies like Naughty Dog that create these visually beautiful graphics at the cost of crunching their workforce or abusing their workforce in any way. We have to say quite loudly that we don't care if your graphics are beautiful, if it means you're abusing your staff. We would rather have a game at, you know, 720p and 30 frames per second. And I love my 60 frames, don't get me wrong, but we'd rather have that in a single player experience than, you know, and more cartoony graphics than you treating people like crap because you have to stretch your budget and, you know, you're forcing a game out the door because of a burn rate. I think that, and that means, you know, not buying games, because boycotts don't work that way. Rewarding and championing studios that made creative decisions that managed resources better instead of a 45-minute level where all you do is put hats on dinosaurs and watch a cutscene where people pretend to go to space. Like, there's a reason I feel strongly about that shit. You should not praise people for sticking a level halfway through a game that is a glorified tech demo when we know there was high staff turnover and massive burnout. These are all connected. These are all things that layer into each other. And I don't like the idea that, you know, sexual abuse of a woman is considered any more bad than, you know, working an employee into sickness or people feeling coerced into never seeing their families because nobody else is seeing their families. Why do you think these guys get so lonely and morally compromised that they start doing this shifty, shady, stupid, wrong, abusive crap in the first place? That's not excusing it. That's having been doing this for a long time and seeing, it doesn't matter if it's television or film or video games or, for fuck's sakes, radio, when the work hours are too long, when people are just mashed in with each other and the only people you see are other coworkers because your work hours are too long and too exhausting to see anybody else, including your own family, we get mistreatment, we get inappropriate behavior, we get sexual harassment. We get guys who are just so desperate for female attention, or in some cases male attention, or in some cases it doesn't matter what gender you call yourself. I just want to feel like I matter to another human being. And again, this isn't excusing the behavior. This is wanting to stop the behavior. And it doesn't matter how people go in to an environment like that. This is why they're called toxic environments. Because even if someone goes in not sick, the environment itself can start making people sick. And that sickness manifests in different ways. So I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that gives a deeper dive into things. I hope that the people were wronged in this situation can begin healing. I hope that people who spoke out, because it's hard, man. Like, it's hard. I cannot describe how hard it is to say I was victimized, I was taken advantage of, I was weak, for lack of a better term. Some things may be misunderstandings, some things may be more complicated than they at first seem, but it takes guts to speak out about stuff like this. And I know I cover a lot of false accusations as well as the real ones, so I just want to make it clear, this is not easy to come forward and say. It is not easy even to try to support someone through something like that and be ignored. It wrecks your faith in humanity. As somebody who's been on both sides of that coin way too often, it is also shitty to be a supervisor who knows wrong was done, who escalates it up the chain and sees it goes nowhere. I've been in that situation too. There's only so much you can do as middle management. It is nausea inducing when that happens because you don't have the power to do anything about it. And this is widespread, not just in gaming. I still maintain that the reason we hear about it in gaming is we're a better run industry, despite it all, than the industries that cover it up more. Look at the shit coming out of the frickin' MacGyver thing. MacGyver. It's like the happiest, dumbest show. I love that show. But, you know, the fact that the whole cast was like abused by the showrunner, like it makes me want to puke. Cause like, how can anybody like abuse Mac and Bozer and Maddie? But okay, enough of my TV viewing habits. I hope you get what I'm saying. I'm trying to lighten it up because this stuff is clearly personally upsetting. If you like this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.